In recent years, we can clearly feel that Western countries are imposing more and more restrictions on China and Russia in terms of shipping. In response to this situation, Russia and China began planning a route called Arctic Express No. 1 a few years ago. This route is about 13,000 kilometers long and aims to create a new ice Silk Road. In order to accelerate this plan, China and Russia have now formally established a special Arctic Waterway Cooperation Subcommittee. Why do this? Because the strategic significance of this Arctic route is really too important. At present, it is the shortest sea transport route connecting East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Northern Europe and Western Europe. If this route is successfully built and put into use, it will provide China and Russia with an alternative route that can bypass the Suez Canal and the Strait of Malacca. In this way, the U.S. military threat on these key waterways can be effectively avoided. So, why does this Arctic route have such great strategic significance? How does it avoid the threat of the U.S. military? If you like our video content, please click to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can receive all our latest video content. Now, let's get into today's topic. In fact, many people don't know that the so-called Arctic Waterway is not a single route, but consists of three main routes. They are mainly located in the waters of the Arctic Ocean, connecting the North Atlantic and the North Pacific. The three routes are the Central Passage, the Northwest Passage, and the Northeast Passage. The history of the Arctic route can be traced back to the 16th century. At that time, Portugal and Spain monopolized the routes around the southern tip of Africa and Latin America, which prompted explorers from Western Europe and Northern Europe to begin looking for a new way. They hoped to find a route through the Arctic Ocean in the North Atlantic, thereby establishing direct trade links with the rich land in the east. However, due to the long-term thick ice cover of the Arctic Ocean, this exploration journey lasted for more than 2 centuries, full of endless hardships and challenges. It was not until the mid-19th century that the Soviet Union finally achieved passage on some sections, proving the existence of the Northwest Passage. With the Soviet Union's continued investment in the development of polar energy resources, the importance of the Arctic route has continued to increase, and the cargo volume once reached 6.6 million tons. It is worth mentioning that although the Northwest Passage has been successfully opened, the Northeast Passage has not been fully opened. The main reason is that the economic and military power of many Asian countries was not strong enough at that time, so the Soviet Union did not invest a lot of resources in this route. But after entering the 21st century, with the rapid development of China's economy, the demand for foreign trade has also increased rapidly. In response to this change, Russia began to re-emphasize and develop the Northeast Passage in 2009. However, the biggest challenge facing this route is the severe glacier coverage. Every time a trade ship passes, it needs the assistance of an icebreaker. Even when the glaciers melt in summer and autumn, navigation can only be carried out reluctantly, and this melting period is usually only a short half a month. These factors have prevented the Northeast Passage from being widely used so far. However, Russia's goal is to make this route navigable all year round. It was not until 2017 that Russia began to actively seek China's participation, hoping to use China's power to promote the development of the Arctic route. At the Belt and Road International Cooperation Summit Forum that year, Russian President Putin expressed the hope that China could make full use of the Arctic route and combine it with the Belt and Road initiative to jointly create a new ice Silk Road. In July of the same year, during his visit to Russia, China's leaders officially mentioned the need to strengthen cooperation on the Arctic route and jointly build the ice Silk Road. So do you know why China is also willing to help develop this Arctic route? From the currently available information, we found that the Arctic route can be roughly divided into 3 main sections. The first section is from the Baralast Logistics Center in Moscow State, where goods are transported by rail to the port of Arkhangelsk, with a total journey of about 1,200 kilometers. The second section is from the port of Arkhangelsk, along the Arctic route, commonly known as the Northeast Passage, and by sea to Cape Dezhnev in the Bering Strait, with a journey of about 5,600 kilometers. The third section starts from the Bering Strait, along the route along the west coast of the North Pacific, and finally arrives at China's coastal ports, with a journey of about 6,600 kilometers. The total mileage of the entire Arctic route is about 13,200 kilometers, and the entire transportation process takes about 20 to 25 days. According to the current plan, among the three routes, the Northeast Passage has the best conditions. This route extends from the Barents Sea on the border between Russia and Norway to the Bering Strait, and is almost entirely in the Arctic coastal area of Russia. This is also the shortest sea transportation route between East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Northern Europe and Western Europe. Therefore, if the Arctic route can be successfully developed, the sea transportation time between Europe and Asia will be greatly shortened. For example, if a ship departs from Shanghai, China to St. Petersburg, Russia, and sails back and forth through the Arctic route, the transportation distance can be shortened by 5,000 to 8,000 kilometers, and the entire journey only takes about 20 days. If you choose to bypass the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, the journey will take about 36 days. In addition, there are fewer ports along the Arctic route, and it is not easy to get congested. And because of its remote geographical location, there is almost no threat of pirates. These factors give the Arctic route a significant advantage in both transportation time and safety. Although the Arctic route mainly sails along the Russian coastline, and there may be certain risks in bad weather conditions, the advantage of saving transportation time and costs is still very obvious. It is worth noting that since the outbreak of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict in February 2022, Russia has been subject to severe sanctions from the United States and Western countries, and many international mainstream shipping companies have withdrawn from Russian ports. At the same time, the traditional routes between Russia and other countries' ports are also facing pressure and blockades from the United States and the West. Therefore, Russia has attached more importance to the development of the Arctic route and plans to accelerate the realization of normalized navigation of the Northeast Passage throughout the year in the next few years. In order to promote this goal, President Putin reached an important agreement with China during his visit to China in May this year. The two sides agreed to establish a committee to work on making the Arctic route a major international transportation channel and plan to further strengthen the construction of shipping services and infrastructure. By August 2024, China and Russia officially established the Arctic Route Cooperation Subcommittee, which can be regarded as a joint multinational department specially established to promote the development of the Arctic route. As the cooperation between China and Russia on the Arctic Route project deepens, some strategic experts have raised questions. Why does China support the development of the Arctic route so strongly? They believe that there may be a strategic motivation behind this, that China wants to get rid of the geopolitical and military influence of the United States. So, what does all this have to do with the United States? As we all know, China is one of the world's largest importers of crude oil, and most of the oil from the Middle East and Africa must pass through the Strait of Malacca to be shipped to China. For China, the Strait of Malacca is not only the fastest route for exporting goods to Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, but also the most important transportation channel. Therefore, the United States has been trying to control this important waterway so as to cut off China's foreign trade lifeline when necessary. In order to achieve this strategic goal, the United States has taken a variety of measures around the Strait of Malacca over the years. First, the United States has tried to increase its influence on the Strait of Malacca by strengthening cooperation with Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. At present, These three countries jointly control the control and management of the Strait of Malacca, and the United States hopes to exert greater strategic influence on the region by winning them over. In addition, the United States has continued to strengthen its military presence around the Strait of Malacca. At present, the U.S. military has a key military base in the region, Singapore's Changi Naval Base. However, for the United States, Changi Base alone is obviously not enough. They have recently set their sights on other strategic locations, such as Australia's Cocos Islands and Bangladesh's St. Martin Island, planning to establish more military bases in these places so that they can block the Strait of Malacca with heavy troops when necessary. However, for China, once the Arctic route is connected, the degree of dependence on the Strait of Malacca will be greatly reduced, and the safety factor of foreign trade will be greatly improved. This strategic channel jointly developed by Russia and China is enough to make the United States feel uneasy, because the strategic layout of hundreds of billions of dollars invested by the United States in Asia may lose its effectiveness. In fact, in order to improve the navigation capacity of the Arctic route, China has been focusing on the development of large icebreakers. For example, the Shuilong 2. This ship is China's first independently built polar scientific research icebreaker and the world's first icebreaker using bow and stern two-way icebreaking technology. It can continuously break ice at a speed of 2 to 3 knots per hour in 1.5 meter thick polar ice. In addition, the Shuilong 2 is also the world's first polar scientific research icebreaker to obtain the symbol of a smart ship equipped with a smart hull and smart engine room. The total length of the ship is about 122.5 meters. The maximum width reaches 22.3 meters. The displacement is close to 14,000 tons, and the icebreaking capacity reaches the PC-3 level. At the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in June 2024, China's Xinjiang Shipping Company signed a cooperation agreement with the Russian state Atomic Energy Corporation. The two sides plan to form a fleet capable of sailing in the Arctic route all year round, and will build the first batch of 5 Arc-7 class polar container ships, with the first ship expected to be put into operation in 2027. By then, China and Russia will achieve the goal of sailing in the Northeast Passage from summer and autumn to year-round navigation. According to Russian data, the cargo volume along the Northeast Passage of the Arctic route has increased from 4 million tons in 2014 to 36 million tons in 2023. This growth is enough to prove that the importance of the Arctic route as a trade channel is increasing year by year. But Russia hopes that through cooperation with China, the cargo transportation volume of this route can reach 270 million tons by 2030. So, do you think that, driven by the cooperation between China and Russia, this project has the potential to become a new Silk Road? To not miss out on our future projects and news updates, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We will continue to provide you with more exciting and interesting content.